when last we left our heroes.
If you are ever on Twitter and scroll through the Arena decklist feed, it can feel like the world has got to Mythic with ease and you are lagging behind. Trust me, you are not alone. Magic is hard and grinding the ladder on Arena can be one of the most challenging things to stick to, especially when you feel like you can't even buy a win. Since the last episode, we have remained in Diamond with most of our sessions feeling like this. We have certainly seen a meta change from Platinum to Diamond with a big increase in aggro decks. Not only mono red, but we have played against white aggro a number of times as well as Gruul, and no matter what we played, we couldn't string a series of wins together to progress up the ladder.
Dead! You're all dead! It's that easy.
It's also important to note that the time of day you play can have an impact on your progression. Personally, we've found our matches get harder after 7 PM UK time, so if you can play in the morning or during the day, you may find it easier to string together your wins. With the abundance of aggro decks we are coming up against, we decided to try a different deck. The Elves deck lacks the interaction that we need, and the Citadel deck is just a bit too slow and we often die before we can go off. We need a deck that has access to sweepers to combat the creature decks we face, but not fold completely to other archetypes. Following the MPL last week, I liked the look of Gregor Kowalski's Dimir Kefnet deck, so I decided to give it a run in Arena and see if it could help us make it to Mythic.
Cue the dramatic intro.
The namesake of our deck is God Eternal Kefnet. He allows us to copy any instant or sorcery, providing it is the first card we draw each turn, with a 2 mana discount. This ability helps us cast powerful spells at a fraction of their cost whilst keeping the original in our hand. He also has the God Clause from War of the Spark, meaning if he were to die or be exiled, we can choose to put him back into our library third from the top. This allows him to escape nearly all forms of removal. With a 4/5 body, he is also a great blocker, especially against the small aggressive creatures we have seen increasingly in the Diamond tier. In order to make use of Kefnet's ability, we need to run some big spells that get the most from the discount. The main card for this is Enter the God Eternals. This card does a lot. The 4 damage removes the vast majority of opposing creatures, the mill can help us remove other gods we've come up against if they've been put back into the library, the life gain gives us better game against aggro decks, and the Amass 4 gives us a decent body on the field for further blocks or our own attacks. Vraska's Contempt is the catch-all removal that helps against the increased numbers of Planewalkers in the format. This is backed up with further removal in the form of Cast Down and Tyrant Scorn. Cry of the Carnarium and Ritual of Soot are our sweeper pair that can keep the board clear of go-wide threats. We also run a single copy of the Elder spell in the main deck for when we oppose Super Friends decks. We have Card Draw with 4 ops as a cheap cantrip, as well as Search for Azcanta, which partners with Kefnet to help smooth our draws and get the most value. Thought Erasure is included for hand disruption and to keep our opponents off tempo. The Surveil also helps us to ensure we draw relevant cards when required. We run 2 copies of Negate in the main board to counter the vast majority of non-creature spells that can disrupt our game plan. Negate can also act as protection for our own bombs, particularly our Planeswalkers. We run 3 Planeswalkers in this deck. Narset is included to stifle any card draw decks. Izzet Phoenix has seen a revival lately with a lot of them including Saheeli to gain further value from all the spells they cast, and Narset stifles their game plan well. Ugin is included to help us deal with enchantments, mainly because Experimental Frenzy can punish this deck. He can also give us further options in creature or planeswalker removal if we have no other options in hand. Finally, Liliana Dreadhorde General is an alternative finisher with a game-winning ultimate. She lets us draw cards if our creatures die and provides a mini sweeper option with her -4 ability. Before we get to the gameplay, we did record some games earlier in the week, however the footage did not come out great as Arena was running slow and we didn't think you would enjoy 5 games of a blurry screen with jumpy interactions. However, we managed to win a few games, including a 50-minute epic mirror match that saw our opponents stabilise at 4 life, making us grind out the victory. So we start this run having just reached Diamond 2. With the end of the season in sight, let's see how we do. Here's the gameplay. In game 1 we mulligan our first hand as we have no blue mana and all blue spells, into a 6 with both colours. We keep an opt on top as we are on the draw, and this will help smooth our coming draws. Our opponent starts with a mountain, suggesting that we are once again playing against mono red, or rather as the cool kids call it,
burn baby burn.
We reciprocate with an island and pass. Steam King from our opponent on turn 2 confirms our suspicions and we opt on their end step. We scry a second Opt to the bottom to try and hit land because Enter the God Eternals will be a key spell in this game. We draw a Liliana and then our third land. We cast down the Steamkin before it has a chance to get going and pass the turn. A third mountain from our opponent, and they main phase a Lightning Strike in order to cast Light Up the Stage for its spectacle cost. Light Up the Stage gives them access to Lightning Strike and Viashino Pyromancer. If they have another land next turn, they will be able to cast both of these spells. We cast a Thought Erasure and remove a Wizard's Lightning from their hand, as it is better for us in the graveyard than it is hitting us in the face. We Surveil and Opt into the graveyard and play a tapped Watery Grave. On their turn, our opponent casts the Pyromancer in order to spectacle a second Light Up the Stage, revealing a second Pyromancer and a mountain. They play the land for turn, which we assume is for the Wizard's Lightning in their hand. We draw a Kefnet, which will be a great creature for us if we can find a fourth land. We Thought Erasure again, and our opponent casts the Wizard's Lightning in response, taking our life total to 12. While still quite high, a top-decked Experimental Frenzy can soon reduce that before we have a chance to respond. We take the Lightning Strike left in their hand and Surveil and Opt to the graveyard as we really want a fourth land for Kefnet. Our opponent's turn, they cast the Pyromancer from the previous turn and a Lava Runner they drew this turn. They attack and have halved our life total in one turn. Just when all looks lost, we draw the perfect card in Cry of the Carnarian because it is better to be lucky than good. We wipe their board and pass, hoping we get another turn to fully stabilise. Our opponent casts a Steamkin and we finally hit land number 4. We cast Kefnet and get to enjoy his ETB animation, which can only be described as glorious. Opponent's turn and they draw a land and pass. We hit the 5th land we need to cast Enter the God Eternals. This allows us to remove the Steamkin and gain a valuable 4 points of life. The Amass creature also allows us to freely attack as we can block any hasty creatures that may be played. An opponent casts a full price Light Up the Stage and unfortunately reveals 2 mountains. We draw a 6th land, meaning we can play Liliana this turn. We attack for 8 points of damage before casting Liliana and making a zombie. We have Lethal on board, and after drawing their card for turn, our opponent concedes. We then played 2 more games against Mono Red where our sweepers and builds in life game were integral to us stabilising and closing out the game.
Another child orphaned.
We were also victorious against a Gruul aggro deck that looked to ramp into big creatures such as Skargan, Hellkite and Neheb. Fortunately for our opponent on this occasion, they stumbled on their land drops and were unable to fully recover. This game we keep a 7 that allows us to opt on turn 1. Our opponent leads with a forest and an Arboreal Grazer, placing a second forest into play. We play an island and leave up Opt for their end step. An opponent casts 2 Llanowar Elves and passes the turn. We opt into a negate which we leave on top as it could answer a potential Nissa next turn if our opponent has a 3rd land. We play a swamp for turn and pass, holding up the negate. Our opponent casts Bond of Flourishing to find the land, they reveal a forest and cast a 3rd Llanowar Elf. They attack for 2 and we opt in response and leave a Ritual Assault on top to draw as it will be handy in this game. We then draw a Vraska's Contempt which gives us another answer to Nissa, so we decide to get Search for Azcanta going on this turn as we can take the damage from their attacks. They play a Nissa on their turn and animate a land. They attack for 4 with the land and an elf. We draw an island for turn and cast Vraska's Contempt on Nissa as our Ritual Assault can take care of their board next turn. Nissa number 2 from our opponent and they animate a second land before attacking us for 6. We graveyard a second copy of Search for Azcanta and draw a Liliana. We play an island for turn and cast Ritual of Sut. This leaves them with a Nissa and a single forest in play. On their turn, they animate their final forest and attack for 3, taking us to 7 life. We draw a Vraska's Contempt and cast Enter the God Eternals on their forest, leaving them with no mana. With no lands in play, our opponent concedes and we pick up the win. Following this game, we hit a rough patch and lost against a white aggro deck when our sweepers were nowhere to be seen, before falling to a Grixis control deck in which Big Bad Nicky B brought all his friends to take over the game. In this one we keep our opening hand and our opponent leads with a forest and a Llanowar Elf. We draw a Vraska's Contempt and lead off with an island. Our opponent plays a second forest and casts another Llanowar Elf, following it up with a Paradise Druid. We play a Drowned Catacomb and Thought Erasure to look at their hand. This reveals they are a Simic deck based around Hadana's Climb. We decide to take the counter spell as we have some removal in hand which we hope will get through and prevent the Hadana's Climb from flipping. We leave a land on top from the Surveil and pass the turn. On their turn, our opponent casts Hadana's Climb and puts a counter on the Llanowar Elf at the start of combat. They don't attack and they pass the turn. We then play a Drowned Catacomb and hold up Cast Down, which we intend to use after the Llanowar Elf has got a second counter. At the start of combat on their turn, they put a second counter on the Llanowar Elf and attack. We cast the Cast Down, targeting the Elf, but unfortunately this is countered by a negate and we take 3. On our turn, we choose to cast Kefnet as he blocks well against our opponent's creatures, but unfortunately he is countered by Syncopate. This leaves us tapped out with nothing on board. Llanowar Elf gets counter number 3, which flips our opponent's Hadana's Climb. He then uses this to pump the Llanowar Elf, he attacks with everything and we take 11 damage. On our turn, we cast Enter the God Eternals, dealing 4 damage to the Elf and gaining 4 points of life. We make a 4/4 zombie, however our opponent can go over this by giving a creature flying with Hadana's Climb, so we still need to answer his creatures. Our opponent chooses to do nothing on their turn and passes with 1 card in hand, which is most likely a counterspell. We play a Swamp on their turn and once again try to cast Kefnet. This time he is met with a Sinister Sabotage and we pass the turn. Once again our opponent chooses not to attack and passes, leaving all his mana up and 1 card in hand. On our turn we play a Narset, which gets countered by a Frilled Mystic. We play a Search for Azcanta to look for a sweeper, leaving our zombie to block. On their turn our opponent goes to combat and attacks with the Frilled Mystic, choosing not to pump it. This allows us to block with the zombie and they pump in response in order for their Frilled Mystic to survive. This has allowed us to prevent 6 points of damage however and given us some time. We put an island in the graveyard using our Search for Azcanta trigger and draw a second island for the turn. We play the land and pass, holding up a Vraska's Contempt. On their turn our opponent attacks with everything and in response to the pump activation we cast Vraska's Contempt on the Frilled Mystic. We take 3 damage from the other creatures, however the life gain means we are only down 1 life overall. Back to us and we put another island in the graveyard and transform the Search for Azcanta. We draw and swamp for turn and activate the search to look for removal whilst our opponent has no cards in hand. We find a Contempt of the search and use it immediately to remove the druid as it does not currently have hexproof due to being tapped from the previous attack. Their turn our opponent pumps the elf with the Hadana's Climb but chooses not to attack. On our turn we draw a Blast Zone, which is perfect as we can activate this immediately to remove the Llanowar Elf. As it is an activation and not a spell, we can be pretty confident that our opponent does not have a counter for this, which is confirmed when the elf dies. Our opponent plays a land on their turn and passes with 1 card in hand. We search on their end step and take a Narset to help us dig for answers. We draw an Ugin for turn, which we really want to resolve, so we cast the Narset first in order to bait out a counterspell. A Frilled Mystic from our opponent sees off Narset, but this now clears the way for Ugin. We tick down Ugin to destroy the Frilled Mystic and our opponent concedes. This win set us back on track and we followed it up with a victory against Gruul Aggro after our opponent timed out with only a single Phoenix on the board. We keep our opening hand and lead with a tapped Watery Grave. Our opponent is inspired by this line of play and decides to copy with a tapped Godless Shrine. We play an island, allowing us to cast a negate in our hand if necessary. On their turn our opponent casts a Knight of Malice. We have played the Orzhov Knights deck earlier on in the ladder and the White Knight can be problematic as the Hexproof from Black ability stifles all of our single target removal. We cast a Narset on turn 3 and tick down. We take the Enter the God Eternals and pass the turn. Knight of Grace from our opponent, allowing the Knights to pump one another and they attack for 3 using the Knight of Malice. We play an island for turn and cast Kefnet as the 5 toughness lines up well against the Knight's first strike ability. We tick down Narset again and take the Ugin. A Prism Realm from our opponent temporarily deals with Kefnet as he goes back into our library 3rd from the top. They attack us with both creatures and we take 6. On our turn, we cast Enter the God Eternals to remove the Knight of Malice, gain 4 life and make a 4/4 zombie. Once again, the toughness lines up well against the first strike ability of our opponent's Knight. On their turn, they cast down our zombie token and play a Jarni's Pridemate. They attack with the Knight, however, removing our zombie means there's no black permanents in play and the Knight is back to being a 2/2. We cast Liliana and use her -4 ability to clear our opponent's board before passing the turn. Our opponent plays a second Prism Realm to remove Liliana, but we plan to cast Ugin next turn to get her back. As Ugin is revealed in our hand, we believe our opponent sees this line of play and concedes the match, giving us the victory we need to reach Tier 1 Diamond. And that is where we finish this season in Diamond 1, just a single tier from our target of hitting Mythic for the season. However, we are confident that we can reach this next month and who knows, maybe even the top 1000. If you're looking for a deck that can answer the abundance of aggro decks on the ladder, then this is a great choice. The colour combination offers the best removal in standard and can sideboard into a full control deck when required. When rankings reset, a lot of people play mono red to try and climb as quickly as possible, so this may be a wise choice at the start of a new season. As always, if you enjoyed this video, then please like, share or leave a comment below. If you want to see how we get on in the coming season, then subscribe to keep up to date with our progress, and you can follow us on all the socials at Making Mythic. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you next time.